before history was written, before empires rose and fell. There were hands that built wonders we can no longer explain, machines buried in stone, maps older than ice, stories carved in languages long forgotten. These are the lost artifacts that shouldn't exist. What of the past we know? Is only the last chapter of a story much older than time? Beneath the dust of forgotten deserts, in caves sealed for thousands of years and under layers of stone older than history itself, lie objects that defy everything we know about our past. Artifacts so advanced, so precise, so out of place that they seem to whisper, "We are not the first." Imagine walking into a mountain cave and finding a metal gear fused inside solid rock, a piece of technology that shouldn't exist for another million years. Picture an ancient map showing the world's coastlines with modern accuracy, including Antarctica, drawn without ice. Or a small clay jar that somehow produces electricity long before the word battery was ever spoken. These are not scenes from science fiction. They are real discoveries, documented, photographed, studied, yet still unexplained. They don't fit the timeline we've built for ourselves. They don't belong to the story of simple hunters and gatherers slowly becoming modern humans. Instead, they suggest a deeper, hidden story, one erased, forgotten, or perhaps deliberately buried. Who created these impossible objects? Were they the work of a lost civilization, one erased by flood, fire, or time itself? Or could they be traces of something far older, something not of this earth? For centuries, mainstream science has dismissed them, calling them coincidences, hoaxes, or natural formations. But the evidence keeps resurfacing, refusing to stay silent. Each artifact, a spark in the dark, forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How old is human civilization, really? How many times have we risen, fallen, and forgotten? Tonight, we descend into the vaults of time to uncover the lost artifacts that shouldn't exist. Objects that break the boundaries of history, challenge the logic of science, and remind us that sometimes the past is far more advanced than the present dares to believe. The year was 1901, off the rocky coast of a small Greek island called Antarctica. A team of sponge divers descended into the deep. The sea was cold, silent, and heavy with mystery. What they brought back would rewrite history, or at least should have, from the wreckage of an ancient ship, encrusted with coral and centuries of silence. They lifted a strange lump of bronze and wood. At first, it looked worthless, just another relic from the ocean floor. But inside that corroded mass lay gears, dozens of them, perfectly carved, interlocking, turning with impossible precision. When scientists x-rayed the object decades later, they were stunned. It wasn't a statue. It wasn't a clock. It was a machine. A device built more than 2,000 years ago, capable of predicting eclipses, tracking the movements of planets, even marking the ancient Olympic Games. They called it the Antarctica mechanism, the world's first computer. Think about that. A mechanical computer, built when most of the world was still shaping bronze with hammers and fire. Its gears were cut so finely that even modern watchmakers struggle to replicate them. How could ancient hands have crafted such perfection, without modern tools, without magnification, without machines? No surviving text describes how it was made. No workshop has ever been found. It appears in history, and then vanishes. Some believe it was a miracle of Greek genius, a single mind centuries ahead of its time. Others whisper that it was not of human origin at all. Was it a lost inheritance from a forgotten civilization? Or a fragment of knowledge passed down from something, or someone older than history itself? Whatever the truth, the Antarctica mechanism stands as a quiet rebellion against our idea of progress. A whisper from the ancient world, saying, "You are not the first to understand the heavens." In the dry heat of ancient Mesopotamia, long before the rise of Rome, before the word electricity was ever spoken, someone built something extraordinary. In the 1930s, archaeologists digging near Baghdad uncovered a small clay jar. Nothing remarkable at first glance, until they looked inside. A copper cylinder, an iron rod, and traces of acidic residue lining the walls. When a modern scientist poured vinegar into a replica of that jar, the device produced a spark, a faint but unmistakable electric current. The discovery stunned the world. Could this humble clay pot be a battery? A working power source from more than 2,000 years ago? We call it the Baghdad battery, a name simple enough for an object that should not exist. If it truly generated electricity, then it changes everything we know about ancient technology. It means someone, somewhere, understood how to create and store power, when the rest of humanity still lit the night with fire and oil. Some historians suggest it was used for electroplating, coating statues with thin layers of gold. Others imagine it powering primitive lights deep inside temples, casting a glow that priests called divine. But deeper questions remain. Who invented it? And where did the knowledge come from? Because there are no other tools like it. No instructions. No records. Just silence. One single jar, standing alone in history, humming with a mystery that refuses to fade. Skeptics call it coincidence, an accident of design. Believers see it as proof of a hidden science, a memory from a lost civilization that once harnessed energy the way we do now. Whatever the truth, the Baghdad battery remains an enigma, a small jar of clay, whispering from across the ages, reminding us that light, true light, has flickered on this earth long before we believed it could. On a winter morning in 1513, in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, an admiral named Piri Reis spread a sheet of gazelle skin across his table. It was worn, cracked by time, and drawn with inks of red, green, and gold. Across its surface, coastlines, islands, and oceans intertwined in astonishing detail. When modern scholars examined the map centuries later, they were stunned. It showed South America, accurate to within miles. Rivers, mountains, harbors, all rendered with impossible precision. But the true mystery lay at the bottom edge. A vast white continent labeled simply as Antarctica, drawn not as we see it now, frozen and lifeless, but ice-free, with valleys and ridges revealed beneath the glaciers. Antarctica was not discovered until 1820. Yet here it was, charted 300 years earlier. How could a 16th century sailor know the shape of a land buried under miles of ice? Historians tried to explain. They said Piri Reis must have copied from older sources, maps long lost time, but he himself wrote in the margins that his references came from ancient charts of the early kings, and one drawn by Alexander. Sources, he claimed, far older than Greece or Egypt. Some say those maps were relics of forgotten age, drawn by a civilization that sailed the world before the last ice age, when Antarctica was green. Others whisper of knowledge passed down from survivors of a great flood, their secrets preserved through empires until Piri Reis pieced them together. The parchment still exists, kept behind glass in Topkapi Palace, its colors fading but its riddle intact. A map that shouldn't exist, pointing to a world that shouldn't be remembered. Was it coincidence? Or evidence that humanity once measured the earth with eyes that reach beyond history itself? The Piri Reis map, a silent navigator from the past, reminding us that the edges of our knowledge may not be edges at all. It began, as many great mysteries do, with something ordinary. In February 1961, 3 friends wandered the dry hills near Olancha, California, searching for geodes, those crystal stones that sparkle when cracked open. The sun was sharp. The earth was silent. They found one stone, smooth, round, heavy, and slipped it into a bag without a second thought. Days later, when they cut it open with a diamond saw, they froze. Inside the rock was not crystal, but metal, a cylinder, shiny, perfectly symmetrical, and at its center, an object that looked disturbingly familiar, a spark plug, encased in solid stone. The geologists who examined it estimated the surrounding matrix to be 500,000 years old, 500,000 years. Long before humans had engines, factories, or even writing, the object became known as the Koso artifact, and from that day, nothing about it made sense. X-rays revealed a coil and a threaded cap, details identical to modern mechanical parts. Yet the rock encasing it was ancient, compacted under layers of silt that should have taken eons to form. How could a man-made object be trapped inside a geological formation older than humanity itself? Was it a hoax? An anomaly of nature? Or evidence Terrifying evidence of a cycle of civilizations lost to time? Skeptics argued contamination. Believers whispered other possibilities. They spoke of advanced cultures erased by cataclysm, of timelines far older than textbooks allow, and of technologies that once lit the world, only to be buried again in silence. The artifact vanished soon after, lost, stolen, or hidden. Only photographs and X-rays remain, and a story that refuses to die. A machine inside a stone. A spark plug inside a 500,000-year-old world. A whisper carried through the desert wind, reminding us that perhaps humanity has walked this road before and forgotten. It began, as many great mysteries do, with something ordinary. In February 1961, 3 friends wandered the dry hills near Olancha, California, searching for geodes, those crystal stones that sparkle when cracked open. The sun was sharp. The earth was silent. They found one stone, smooth, round, heavy, and slipped it into a bag without a second thought. Days later, when they cut it open with a diamond saw, they froze. Inside the rock was not crystal, but metal, a cylinder, shiny, perfectly symmetrical, and at its center, an object that looked disturbingly familiar, a spark plug, encased in solid stone. The geologists who examined it estimated the surrounding matrix to be 500,000 years old, 500,000 years, long before humans had engines, factories, or even writing. The object became known as the Koso artifact, and from that day, nothing about it made sense. X-rays revealed a coil and a threaded cap, details identical to modern mechanical parts. Yet the rock encasing it was ancient, compacted under layers of silt that should have taken eons to form. How could a man-made object be trapped inside a geological formation older than humanity itself? Was it a hoax? An anomaly of nature? Or evidence? Terrifying evidence of a cycle of civilizations lost to time? Skeptics argued contamination. Believers whispered other possibilities. They spoke of advanced cultures erased by cataclysm, of timelines far older than textbooks allow, and of technologies that once lit the world, only to be buried again in silence. The artifact vanished soon after, lost, stolen, or hidden. Only photographs and X-rays remain, and a story that refuses to die. A machine inside a stone. A spark plug inside a 500,000-year-old world. A whisper carried through the desert wind, reminding us that perhaps humanity has walked this road before and forgotten. High in the misty mountains of western China, beyond the snow lines of the Bayan Ula Range, a team of explorers entered a series of hidden caves. The year was 1938. The air was thin, the walls carved with strange symbols that no one could read. Inside, they found rows of tiny skeletons, thin, fragile, no taller than 4 feet. And beside them, hundreds of stone discs, each about the size of a record, 716 in total. Each disc was etched with an intricate spiral, a groove running from the outer edge all the way to a small hole in the center, like an ancient vinyl whispering a forgotten song. When examined under magnification, the carvings revealed something extraordinary. Tiny characters, so delicate they could only have been cut with instruments of microscopic precision. After years of study, a translation was attempted. The symbols told a story of travelers who came from the stars. They called themselves the Dropa. Their ship crashed in these mountains, and they could never return home. They lived among the tribes, feared and misunderstood, until sickness or sorrow took them all. Skeptics dismissed the tale as myth, the product of Cold War sensationalism. Yet the stones themselves, when tested, contained traces of cobalt and unusual magnetic properties, suggesting technology, not ritual. Then the trail went cold. The Chinese government sealed the caves, and the artifacts vanished from public record. Only fragments, a few photographs, a few notes, remain as proof that the Dropa stones ever existed at all. But something about them lingers. The precision, the language, the silence that followed. Were they memorials to visitors from another world? Messages left for those who would one day understand? Or relics from a chapter of human history, erased before the first page was even written? In the stillness of the Bayan Karaula, the mountains keep their secret. And somewhere beneath the ice and stone, the Dropa, or their memory, may still be waiting to be found. From the depths of forgotten seas, from deserts that once bloomed, from mountains carved by wind and time, we have uncovered fragments of a world that refuses to stay silent, a machine that calculated the heavens long before machines existed, a jar that could create light when the rest of the world still burned fire, a map that saw through ice and centuries, a spark plug sealed in stone older than man, and discs that whisper of visitors from the stars. Each artifact stands alone, strange, out of place, impossible, but together they begin to form pattern, a pattern of intelligence echoing through time, a pulse that beats beneath history, as if knowledge itself rises and falls in waves, remembered, then lost, then rediscovered again. Perhaps human civilization is not a straight line, but a circle, a cycle of birth, brilliance, and forgetting. Each time the world resets, a few pieces survive, buried, waiting, calling to us through the dust. And maybe that's why they exist, not as proof, but as reminders. Reminders that the past we know is not complete, that the story of humanity may stretch further than we dare to dream, and that somewhere in our collective memory lies a truth so vast, so fragile, that only fragments could survive the ages. Scientists may debate, skeptics may dismiss, but the artifacts remain, silent, unyielding, patient. They ask nothing of us except curiosity. They invite us to look deeper, to question what we've been told, to imagine what else might lie hidden beneath the layers of time. Maybe one day the dust will lift and the pattern will be complete. Until then, we are the seekers, tracing the faint fingerprints of forgotten hands, listening for echoes in the stone, chasing the impossible through the ruins of history. Because somewhere, in the quiet between fact and faith, the truth still waits. And perhaps it has been waiting for us all along. In every mystery we uncover lies another waiting beneath the dust. The story isn't over. It's only beginning. Stay curious. In every mystery we uncover lies another waiting beneath the dust. The story isn't over. It's only beginning. Stay curious.